Hello, I'm Derek Pryor with Resulting, formerly a Gartner analyst specialising in SAP, and today I'm in the Resulting STEM studio with Simon to talk about the role that trust plays in your SAP success. Now, Simon's SAP success, this is something which we both care passionately about, and that research shows increasingly the things we've got to do to build success, but clearly trust plays a major role in this. And I happen to know that you did a PhD project in the whole subject of trust, which the readers are dying to hear about. Now, you did your PhD project. I did my PhD project a few years ago on air pollution, so I know how much effort you have to go to. We're dying to know what happened there, first of all, with your PhD project. How did you pick this fascinating subject?
So, I found myself involved in an SAP program at a large blue chip organisation, a chemist, high street chemist, if I could be as specific as that. And I just thought it was something that I'd thought about doing for a while. Had a great opportunity to observe and to research a team of people on an SAP program over a 3 or 4 year period. So I started looking at the challenges within that team, made up of consultants from a number of partners and from people from the business, and the challenges that they might have combining and sharing their knowledge. And I struck upon the major challenge, which was whether or not they trusted each other and could be comfortable with sharing that knowledge between themselves, and building a solution that the company would be proud of.
Fascinating. This has got such huge payoff for people because the word trust just comes up in conversations of projects when they haven't gone right. So how have you been able to, over the years, apply the findings of your study into a classic scenario where I'm an SAP customer, I'm working with a systems integrator? What could I learn from your previous insight from that study?
It's probably worth starting with my definition of trust, which is somebody's willingness to expose themselves to a degree of risk. And when you think about any SAP program, when a client engages an SI, for example, or a partner, they are taking on trust, the competence of that partner to deliver, and they will make some assumptions. So I think trust begins at the vendor selection stage, and then we'll have a perception of that partner, which proves to be the correct or incorrect as we move through our relationship with them. So it's inherent in every single conversation, in every single meeting, in every single workshop that you have leading up to the selection of the vendor, and I think every interaction from that point on. And it either makes the degree of trust and the way that is either broken down or reinforced affects the success of the relationship and ultimately the success of the project.
Have you been able to then, Simon, some of the projects, SAP projects you've worked on in the past, been able to link back to this previous research and previous experience to help a customer in a situation where you can spot things are starting to drift and you can see the warning signs of lack of trust? Have you been able to use that insight in that way to try and help steer back on track?
Maybe in a roundabout way. I think it's quite difficult to talk purely in terms of trust because it's quite an emotive subject to address. But certainly I can observe situations where trust is either not present or not where it ought to be, or deteriorating over time, and been able to work with senior executives to flag that up and then to look at strategies of actually developing or improving those trust relations. Not always easy. Sometimes it can get to a point where it's damaged beyond recovery, but actually just flushing out some of those issues in itself is a helpful process to go through.
Fascinating. And of course, as we've been saying, it's this big impact stuff. We've got to get it right, and it's easy to say we've got to get it right, but your insight, I think, is going to really be beneficial to help customers actually get it right when there's a systems integrator. But I'm fascinated, do you think, well, has your experience shown you that trust, when it rears its head when we're talking internally, if I compare the relationships between business and IT,
Yeah.
very often we think, well, maybe there's a trust concern here. Do you think this does your insight extend to being able to use this within business IT relationships
Absolutely.
internally?
Absolutely. Any human relationship is impacted by levels of trust. So I think, based on my experience, I was a business person initially having SAP done to me, and I've gone on to work on many SAP implementations over the last nearly 20 years now. I think when you look at the relationship between the IT function and the business, it's often a case of us and them. In my experience, there are perceptions, and made even worse if we've got partners involved, perceptions of the degrees of trustworthiness on both sides. But I still think the solution to that is to actually get people to talk to each other, establish some common ground, some outcomes that they all have in common, and actually starting to get them to work together in a meaningful and a constructive way. And that, creating that common ground, creating that opportunity for exchange and for team building is actually the best way to develop trust, in my opinion. So, but yes, absolutely, definitely exists within internal organisations.
It's interesting. It's very interesting, this, because we've seen in some of our other discussions earlier that communication seems to be one of the big factors, big takeaways that we've got to get right. Now, and many people will say, well, that's not surprising, but we've got to get it right. So we've got to get I think what you're saying is spot on. We've got to find ways of communicating better in order to build the right levels of trust. If we don't, then things are only going to go wrong, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. So it really is important to create clear lines of communication between all the parties involved in delivering an SAP program, for example. The challenge that you have with that is the fact that those people come from different perspectives, different stakeholder groups. So again, I come back to communication is a two-way process. It's about engaging in a discussion rather than in an email exchange, and only when you have those opportunities to have a discussion, to learn from each other, to share knowledge, does communication, in my opinion, start to improve.
Sounds great, and we've covered a fair bit of ground now. How would you sum things up, Simon, for the listener? What's your key takeaways that we need to that you'd like to leave them with?
Yeah, I think most importantly, to have a successful SAP implementation, as an example, we need people with a range and variety of knowledge to work closely together. For them to be able to work together, they need to trust each other. To trust each other, they need to have some common ground. They need to have a relationship that is effective and functional. Trust is really, really important to that. So my recommendation would be to consider that, to recognise trust when it's present, when it's not present, or even worse, when we have a situation where we distrust a partner, and then put processes and opportunities in place to actually address those gaps in trust.
Simon, thank you so much. That's great advice, and we've all seen that. I think we all agree that trust is a critical issue. We're going to need to get everything right in order to maximise SAP success. And for listeners who would like to find out more about SAP success, do check out our SAP success study, and you'll find that on the resulting website. Thank you very much indeed for your time.